All right, Alexander, we have got tensions and escalation in Serbia. Very, very tense past couple of days. The rumor is, according to a channel in Serbia called Pink TV, they said over the weekend, they claim that the ambassadors from UK, US, Italy, Germany, and France, they gave the Vucic government a 24-hour ultimatum to remove the barricades in northern Kosovo, or else the Pristina administration and the security forces, the military, the police in Pristina would get the green light with NATO support to enter the north of Kosovo,
Yeah.
Kosovo, remove those barricades, and impose their will on the ethnic Serbs in that area. The Serbian military is on high alert. Vucic gave a statement yesterday. He said things are very tense and Serbia is in a difficult position, but he seemed also very confident as well that they're going to find a way out of this situation, or a way to confront this threat which is being posed by NATO and Pristina and Kosovo Metohija. No doubt, in my opinion, no doubt that this is part of the escalation from the collective West towards antagonizing and hitting at Russia and the Slavic world that Russia leads, the Orthodox world that Russia leads. This is all part of that attempt to create second and third fronts in this conflict with Russia, and Serbia is front lines with that that policy.
I completely agree with that, and I mean, I have really nothing to add to it. But I mean, if you think that all this crisis has happened at the same time that we have a crisis in Ukraine, and that it's got much worse, even as the military situation for Ukraine deteriorates. If you think this is just chance that it's happened like this, well, I have a bridge to sell you. I mean, there's no doubt at all in my mind that these things this crisis, which has come out of nowhere, and which has been entirely driven, as far as I can see, by Pristina, the Kosovo leadership, which, to be very clear, would do absolutely nothing without a green light from Washington and Brussels and other Western capitals, and would probably actually need to be told to act by those Western capitals before it did anything. If you think this is just chance, well, as I said, it clearly isn't. It's an attempt to distract, embarrass the Russians, show that the Russians who are tied up in Ukraine supposedly can't support their ally Serbia, and that kind of thing. Now, I actually do believe this story that the NATO ambassadors, delivered some kind of warning to the Serbian government over the weekend. I've not seen it properly denied. I don't know that it was an ultimatum exactly, but of course something might. There can be a fine distinction between a warning and an ultimatum. Now, as you of course remember, seems like an age ago, but a year ago, we were doing a historical series, and we talked at that time about an ultimatum that was given to Serbia by certain powers, which are of course Germany and Austria, and of course that ultimatum led directly to the First World War. Now, I would have thought that is a warning that you do not give ultimatums in any form, even if you call them warnings, to Serbia. And some people don't seem to learn from history. I think that the effect of this warning or ultimatum, call it whatever you want, I think it's clarified issues in Belgrade. And I was listening to Vucic. He's still talking about being willing to seek a peaceful solution, but it's quite clear that he's not able or willing to back down. We see the Serb troops being deployed, and the barricades, as of the time of making this video, are still up. So if there was a warning or an ultimatum, the Serbs are rejecting it, and they are, in effect, daring the Western powers and the authorities in Kosovo. If you want to press on, start a conflict in Kosovo, Serbia is ready, its army is there, they can move in. In which case, if you don't want to start that in the West, you're bluffing. And if you are seeking a conflict with us, well, we're ready, and we will see it through. We have the forces, we have the resources to see it through, at least for a time being. And of course, given how Western militaries are acknowledged to have been weakened through all this military equipment that's been sent to Ukraine, one wonders exactly how easy an operation in the Balkans would be. And as we discussed in our previous programs when we talked about this, I do wonder how international opinion would respond to a NATO attack on Serbia, given that most countries in the world do not recognize Kosovo as an independent state, given that the creation of Kosovo appears to violate a UN Security Council resolution and undertakings that were given to both Serbia and Russia at the end of the Yugoslav bombing war, and given that, well, to say it straightforwardly, Western action in the Balkans would appear to contradict much of what the West has been saying about the principles it's following in the Ukraine war. So there might be a reaction, an international reaction. There might be a reaction in the Balkans as well. Situation in Bulgaria, I'm told, is very tense at the moment. There was an election there, which appeared to result in the fall of the pro-Western government. The new government came in. It was going to keep Bulgaria out of the conflict in Ukraine. Obviously, people were leaned on, or some financial inducements were given, which caused the Bulgarian MPs to change their position, and suddenly Bulgaria became even more supportive of Ukraine than it had been previously. Apparently, this is causing lots of tensions in Bulgaria itself. So there's issues in Bulgaria, there's issues in Macedonia, there's all kinds of things that could play out. I think this is a very dangerous strategy, and we'll see again how it goes. But never forget the point we've made so many times on our programs when we say that this whole crisis has been engineered. Who has engineered it? The bureaucracies in Brussels and the neocons who stand behind them. And as we've said many times, those people have no reverse gear. So if there is a conflict in the Balkans, it might be an extremely unwise thing to do. It might create all kinds of problems, both now and in the future. But these people who are engineering it are not the sort of people to back off because of something like that.
Yeah, I agree completely. Vucic, obviously, he doesn't want the conflict
No.
with NATO, so he's trying to avoid that, rightly so. And he's trying to buy some time so that, I imagine, so that their main ally, Russia, Serbia's main ally, deals with Ukraine and then is better able to deal with the threat of NATO towards Serbia. So I think strategically that's the right move. If I was Vucic, I would probably do the same, try to buy some time, find a solution until the situation in Ukraine is sorted out, and then you're on much better footing. But they don't have a reverse gear. They are trying to provoke Serbia and the entire world outside of the collective West. The entire world understands that it is NATO that is antagonizing Serbia. I think there is no doubt about it that they're the ones that are trying to pick a fight with Serbia. The whole world outside of the collective West, 80% of the planet would be on Serbia's side. That includes China, not only Russia, that will include China as well. And if you're Vucic,
India too, by the way, which is very strong.
And India as well, absolutely. India and China as well. They would have Serbia's back to whatever extent they could. And if you're Vucic, you have to ask yourself, NATO has really been weakened by this conflict in Ukraine, severely weakened. The economies of Europe have been weakened. Look at the situation in Bulgaria. Look at the election that happened in Slovakia the other day. Europe and the EU is crumbling. So, maybe I call their bluff, because Vucic really doesn't have an option. He has to protect his people.
No. Yes.
In North
Yes.
Kosovo, you have to protect them. If you don't protect them, Pristina's going to go in there and they are going to they're going to terrorize these people. We know that. That's crystal clear. So you have to protect the Serbs, and politically, he has to do it from a political level as well.
Yes.
He can't cut these people loose, because he's going to suffer a terrible defeat politically at home.
Yes.
So he has to protect those people.
Yes.
It seems that's the only position he could take. But he can call the bluff of NATO and the EU and say, you know what? We're going to stand firm. What are you guys going to do? And it's dangerous. It's very risky. But I agree with you. I think that the European Union and NATO, they may think that they have this overwhelming superiority to Serbia at this moment, given that Russia is tied up in Ukraine. But I don't know. I think this could easily, like the sanctions war that they put up against Russia, this could easily boomerang to damage NATO and the EU to a terrible degree.
Absolutely. I completely agree with every point you've just made. And can I just add, where Vucic is concerned, I mean, it's important to understand, yes, he doesn't want a conflict, because who does? I mean, this is the other thing. I mean, the only kind of people who look for conflicts in the world today are people like the neocons. Responsible statespeople don't look for conflicts. They look for solutions. Vucic has looked for solutions. He's had some criticism for this, but look at the situation in Serbia now. As far as I can see, if you want to get a sense of how Serbs feel, there's no protests in Belgrade saying, Vucic, back down, give the EU and NATO what it wants. Serb people are, on the contrary, they're coming out onto the streets and they're saying we are going to resist. That's where the political pressure on Vucic is. That's the sort of sentiment in Belgrade. So he's not choosing this fight. It's a fight that's being forced on him. He's not the person who's disrupted the status quo in Kosovo. Never at any point in time. The Western powers and the authorities in Pristina have done. Now, if the authorities in Pristina and the Western powers go for broke and, start a conflict in the Balkans, you're absolutely correct. They will be its instigators. And all right, we will have the usual, the famous I can't remember what it's called, the musical instrument that a CIA official said the Western media has become, where the CIA is able to play all the notes and project its views. Well, we will have that kind of thing, that they will we'll be hearing about how Vucic is the second Putin and all of that kind of thing. We're going to have all of that in the West, but outside that Western media bubble, no one anywhere will believe it. No one will fall for it. It will isolate the West even further. It will make the West look increasingly aggressive and violent. And it also, of course, has the potential to alienate more countries, Indonesia, India, Brazil, where Lula is now increasingly pitching himself as reviving the BRICS. He had a very friendly conversation with Putin, by the way. He had a long conversation with Putin, which is unusual. Putin doesn't usually speak to president-elects, but he did with Lula. And apparently it was Lula who initiated the call. So you're going to see a big a very negative international reaction, undermining the Western case over Ukraine to the extent that anybody believes it, which is debatable. But on top of that, a potentially big response in the Balkans as well. And yes, Russia is distracted in Ukraine. So is NATO. NATO, in effect, has been sending all these weapons to Ukraine Western articles are depleted. The German army, we're told, is in no condition to fight any kind of war at the moment. The French army is in bad shape too. Italy has said they can't send any more weapons because, well, their military position is run down as well. So, I mean, you would say that given that you've got this problem in Ukraine, you don't start a conflict somewhere else. Western leaders, they think differently from rational people, and they do the opposite. And like you, I can very easily see how this could backfire.
Yeah, I wonder to myself in closing, I wonder the effects, not only, I mean, you mentioned, effects in India and Indonesia and Brazil, but in Greece, in North Macedonia, in Bulgaria,
Yeah,
in all of these countries,
yeah.
Montenegro,
Remain,
all these countries,
rem,
Romania. Yeah, the people, not the governments, the people. I can
yeah,
speak to Greece. The people in Greece, they're already against all the shenanigans of the Mitsotakis government and the position they're
yeah,
taking, having Azov guys speaking at the parliament, delivering speeches at the parliament and sending weapons and possibly sending S-300s to Ukraine. People in Greece are already at the edge with our foreign policy. Something like this, I think, would just tip everything over, and this is going to really boomerang really hard against the
yes,
boomerang back really hard against a lot of countries in the area.
yes. I can see that. And I mean, I have to say, if I was Mitsotakis, this is for me, well, the Prime Minister of Greece, this would for me be the worst nightmare. A conflict in the Balkans with Serbia and NATO, in which there was pressure on me from the West to take sides against Serbia at a time when I've already upset a lot of people in Greece by backing NATO and Ukraine against Russia. I mean, this would be. I mean, I don't know whether he thinks in those terms because I don't speak with Mitsotakis. But anyway, I mean, I can't imagine the government in Greece would welcome this. I could even see the government collapse on an issue like this. Actually, I mean, there are nationalists within the New Democracy Party as well, and I could see a sort of break. Um, on this. And of course, that's just Greece, and Greece is one of the more stable countries in this part of the world. Bulgaria is not so stable. North Macedonia is not so stable. Montenegro, I mean, they've all witnessed civil unrest, changes of government, all kinds of things going on there. I think to say that this is unwise is a massive understatement. But again, these people have no reverse gear. If they're set on creating a crisis in the Balkans, there's a serious risk that they will do it. And of course, they're also terrified that if they don't do it, if they don't act or whatever it was, warning, ultimatum, or whatever it was that they gave to Vucic over the weekend, that they will be exposed as having simply given an empty bluff, and that's not something these people ever find themselves able to do. So, ultimatum to Serbia, as I said, shades of 1914. I don't think it's going to come to that, but it seems to me an extremely bad idea.
Yeah. And just in closing, let's not forget that while Russia may appear to be distracted, I am positive that Russia is providing support to Serbia in various other forms. Maybe it's not military support, or at least to the degree that Serbia may need it, but in all other aspects, I'm convinced that there's close communication and dialogue with Russia on this matter.
And no question at all. At the very least, there'll be intelligence sharing. So, I mean, the Russians have their eyes in the sky, which are going to be increasing, by the way. They're going to increase the number of satellites they have, apparently. This is apparently the plan. But they'll be able to tell the Serbs, look, this is where the main concentrations of NATO forces are and that kind of thing. And Serbia has, by the way, well-organized industries. Unlike Ukraine, they could produce weapons and things of this kind probably long-range rockets as well, all that kind of thing. Of course, NATO could attack the factories and things like that, but then we're talking about a very big bombing war, like the one we saw in 1999, and that may not play very well in the world. In fact, I can tell you it won't.
Yeah. The Biden White House has to consider the politics on their end as well. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. Yeah.
I don't think
Well, indeed,
Americans would be too pumped
no,
up about another U.S. adventure. They already have Ukraine. 45. They just gave another 45 billion to Ukraine. I can
absolutely.
imagine a large percentage of the American population being like, "No, this is enough, Biden. No
Well,
more."
well, two things to say about that. Firstly, and I hadn't appreciated this, but apparently something like 150 Congress people stayed away from Congress or were not present in Congress when Zelensky came and gave his address. I hadn't realized that. It's not been very widely publicized, but apparently there was a significant number of people who didn't turn up. It's been explained that, this happened at an inconvenient moment. A lot of people were away, but, there was this demand from Nancy Pelosi and everybody, Mitch McConnell, you must all come and turn out and give your full-throated support for Zelensky, and apparently a significant number didn't. So that's the first thing to say. And, the opinion polls on this are fairly clear. Mood in America is shifting. Perhaps an even stronger sign is that Arestovich, Zelensky's spin doctor, who apparently is very close to Zelensky, is now floating the possibility that US support for Ukraine won't continue beyond 2023. So Zelensky's just come back from Washington. He's presumably taken soundings there, at least if he hasn't, members of his entourage will have done. Perhaps there was warnings given when Zelensky met with Biden in the White House, perhaps not from Biden himself, but from other people. But perhaps there is an understanding in Kiev that their time window in Ukraine is closing, in the US is closing. If that is true, then anything that started in the Balkans is only going to accelerate that. There's going to be even more of a sense amongst people in the United States at a time when things are rough there. We're not as rough as in Europe, but things are very cold. There's blackouts. There's inflation. Oil prices are probably going to start rising in a few weeks with China opening up and all that. So things are rough there, and they're going to say, "Well, we got Ukraine, and now we're supposed to be worrying about Kosovo too." I can very easily see how opinion in the US could shift on a dime. It's already shifting, but it could decisively move into into a different position. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the administration ought to be thinking about that as well. But again, if there's an iron rule about neocons, it's that they pay no attention to these things. They control the media, or rather the media backs them overwhelmingly, and the bureaucracy is under their control. And that's the only part of the American conversation that they ever hear. They're not really interested in what people are saying, in their factory breaks or their office breaks in, the hinterland, the giant hinterland of the United States, because ultimately they are not interested in ordinary Americans in the way that real politicians should be. They're far too absorbed with their geopolitical games to think about those considerations. And unfortunately, at the moment, they have a lock grip on the White House.
All right, we will end it there. The Duran.locals.com. We are also on Rockfin as well. And go to the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code GOOD-A. Take care.